She was fired on the spot, until the owner walked in and said she doesn't go anywhere. My name is Maya Rodriguez, and I'm 24 years old. I work as a waitress in Miami. This story is about how getting fired became the best thing that ever happened to me. It started 6 months ago. I was working at an upscale restaurant called Azure. Fine dining, expensive wine, wealthy clientele. I had been there for 3 years, working my way up from hostess to server, making decent money, saving for college. One Friday night, the restaurant was packed. Every table full, kitchen running behind, servers stressed. I was handling a section of 6 tables. One of them had a difficult customer, a woman in her 50s, designer clothes, expensive jewelry. She complained about everything. The wine was too warm, the bread was too cold, the lighting was wrong. I apologized, fixed what I could, stayed professional, but she kept complaining. Finally, she demanded to see the manager. My manager was Derek. He was new, only been there 2 months, trying to prove himself. "What's the problem?" Derek asked the woman. "Your server is incompetent," the woman said. "Rude, unprofessional." "I haven't done anything wrong," I started to say. Derek cut me off. "I apologize, ma'am," he said. "This is unacceptable. Maya, you're fired, effective immediately." "What?" I said, shocked. "You can't just fire me." "I absolutely can," Derek replied. "Give me your apron, leave now." "But I didn't do anything," I argued. "The customer is always right," Derek said, "and this customer says you're rude, so you're done." I looked at the woman. She was smiling, enjoying this. I started taking off my apron, trying not to cry. That's when the owner walked in. His name was Julian Reyes, 35 years old, successful restaurant owner, multiple locations across Miami. I had seen him maybe 3 times in 3 years. He usually stayed behind the scenes. "What's going on here?" Julian asked. "I'm handling a customer complaint," Derek said. "By firing my best server?" Julian asked. "She was rude to a customer," Derek explained. "Was she?" Julian turned to me. "What happened?" "The customer has been complaining all night," I explained, "about everything. I've been apologetic, professional, done everything she asked, but she kept finding problems." Julian turned to the woman. "Is this true?" "I expect good service," the woman said, "and I didn't get it." Julian looked at her plate. "You've eaten most of your meal," he observed. "If the service was that bad, why did you stay?" "I want compensation," the woman said, "for the poor experience." Julian smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "I see," he said. "You're one of those." "One of what?" the woman demanded. "Someone who complains to get free food," Julian explained. "Someone who makes servers' lives miserable for sport. I've seen your type 1,000 times." "Excuse me," the woman said. "I'm a paying customer." "You were a paying customer," Julian corrected. "Now you're banned. Please leave." "You can't ban me," the woman argued. "I absolutely can," Julian said. "This is my restaurant, and I don't tolerate people who abuse my staff. Security will escort you out." The woman left, furious, threatening to leave bad reviews. Julian turned to Derek. "You're fired," he said. "What?" Derek stammered. "You don't fire my best employees without consulting me," Julian explained, "especially not to appease scam artists." "But I was following protocol," Derek argued. "Your protocol is wrong," Julian said. "Good servers are hard to find. Maya has been here 3 years, never had a complaint until tonight, and you fired her over one difficult customer? That's bad management. Clean out your office. I'll have your final check ready tomorrow." Derek left, stunned. Julian turned to me. "You don't go anywhere," he said. "Keep your apron, finish your shift." "But you fired Derek," I pointed out. "For firing you," Julian explained, "which means you're obviously not fired." "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me," Julian replied. "You earned your position here. No one takes that from you without my approval." After that night, things changed. Julian started coming to the restaurant more often, checking in on staff, making sure we were treated fairly. He would ask me questions about the customers, about the service, about how things ran. "You're observant," Julian said one night. "You notice things other servers miss." "I pay attention," I replied. "That's rare," Julian said. Most people just go through the motions. You actually care about the experience. 2 weeks after the firing incident, Julian offered me a promotion. I want you to be head server, he said, training new staff, overseeing the floor. Are you sure? I asked. Very sure, Julian confirmed. You know this restaurant better than anyone, and you care about quality. That matters. I accepted, started training new servers, helping with scheduling, becoming part of management. 3 weeks after the incident, Julian asked me to dinner. Not at the restaurant, somewhere else. Is this about work? I asked. No, Julian admitted. This is personal. I can't date my boss, I said. You're right, Julian agreed. That would be inappropriate. But what if you didn't work for me anymore?
What do you mean? I asked. I'm opening a new restaurant, Julian explained. Completely different concept, modern, casual, focusing on local ingredients. I want you to help me build it. As what? I asked. As my partner, Julian said. You know restaurants, you understand service, you care about quality. I need someone like that. I don't know anything about running a restaurant, I argued. You know more than you think, Julian replied, and you'll learning the rest. I said yes, started working with Julian on the new restaurant, planning the menu, designing the space, hiring staff. 4 months after getting fired, I was part owner of a new restaurant. It was surreal, from waitress to partner in 4 months. The new restaurant was called Tierra, meaning earth. We focused on farm-to-table, local suppliers, sustainable practices. It was Julian's vision, but he let me shape it too. What do you think about the menu? He'd ask. How should we train the staff? What kind of atmosphere should we create? I had opinions on everything, and Julian listened, respected my input, made me feel like a real partner. 5 months after the firing incident, Tierra opened. The first night was chaos. Kitchen overwhelmed, servers confused, customers waiting too long, but we pushed through, fixed problems, learned. By the second week, we had found our rhythm. By the first month, we were getting great reviews. This is working, Julian said. Because of you. Because of us, I corrected. 6 months after getting fired from Azure, I was running Tierra with Julian. We were successful, making money, building something real. But also, we were falling for each other. I know we said we'd keep this professional, Julian said one night after closing. I know, I agreed, but I can't stop thinking about you, Julian admitted. Me neither, I confessed. We started dating, kept it quiet at first, didn't want staff to know, didn't want to complicate the business, but eventually it came out. The staff was supportive, happy for us. 1 year after getting fired, Julian and I were in a relationship, running a successful restaurant, building a life together. 2 years after that night, we opened a second location, then a third. The restaurants were successful. But more than that, Julian and I were partners, in business and in life. 3 years after getting fired, Julian proposed. We were at Tierra, after hours, just us. I have a question, Julian said. Okay, I replied. That night, 3 years ago, Julian began, when Derek fired you, I almost let you go. What? I asked. I walked in at the end, Julian explained. I heard Derek say you were fired. For a second, I almost just accepted it, trusted his judgment. What changed your mind? I asked. I looked at you, Julian said, saw you trying not to cry, saw how hurt you were, and I realized something. What? I pressed. That good people are worth fighting for, Julian explained, that sometimes the system is wrong, that I couldn't let you go without understanding why. He pulled out a ring. Maya Rodriguez, will you marry me? He asked. I said yes. We got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, close friends and family, staff from all our restaurants. In my vows, I talked about that night, about getting fired, about Julian saying, I don't go anywhere. In his vows, Julian talked about fate and timing. If I had come in 5 minutes later, he said, you would have been gone. I never would have known what I was losing, but I came in exactly when I needed to, said exactly what needed to be said. You don't go anywhere. And you didn't. You stayed, built this life with me, became my partner, my love, my everything. 4 years after getting fired, I was married to Julian, co-owner of 3 successful restaurants, living a life I never imagined. That's what I tell people when they ask about us. I was fired. The owner walked in, said, "I don't go anywhere." That was the moment everything changed. But the story doesn't end at 4 years. That's just the beginning. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, learning to balance being partners in business and partners in life, learning when to talk about work and when to just be a couple. 5 years after that night I was fired, we faced our first major business crisis. A competitor opened across the street from Tierra. Same concept, farm to table, local ingredients, everything we did. "They're copying us," I said. "Imitation is flattery," Julian replied. "But also competition," I pointed out. "So we'll be better," Julian said. We updated the menu, improved service, made changes that kept us ahead. The competitor lasted 6 months, then closed. 6 years after getting fired, I got pregnant. It wasn't planned. I was terrified. "How do we run 3 restaurants with a baby?" I asked Julian. "Together," he said, "like we do everything else. We'll figure it out." Our daughter was born 7 months later. We named her Sophia. She was perfect and immediately changed everything. "I can't work these hours anymore," I told Julian when Sophia was 2 months old. "I know," Julian agreed, "so we'll adjust." We hired managers for each location, people we trusted, started spending less time at the restaurants.
More time with Sophia. 7 years after that night, we opened a 4th restaurant, despite having a baby, despite being exhausted, because we couldn't stop building. "This is crazy," I said. "We have a 6-month-old. "We should be focused on her," Julian agreed. "But we're also building her future, building something she can inherit." 8 years after getting fired, Sophia started walking. Julian was obsessed, filming everything, taking photos, being the proud father. "You're going to fill your phone," I joked. "I don't care," Julian said. "I want to remember everything." 9 years after that night, we faced another crisis. One of our restaurants failed a health inspection. Minor violations, but still serious. The press was brutal. Headlines about our failures, reviews questioning our quality. "We'll fix this," Julian said. We addressed every violation, hired a consultant, made changes across all locations, passed the reinspection with flying colors. 10 years after getting fired, we celebrated. A decade since Derek fired me. A decade since Julian said, "I don't go anywhere." In my speech, I reflected on 10 years, on everything we'd built. 10 years ago, I said, I was a waitress making minimum wage plus tips, living paycheck to paycheck, trying to save for college. Then I got fired for defending myself against a scam artist. I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning. Julian walked in at exactly the right moment, said exactly the right thing. "You don't go anywhere." Those 3 words changed my life, led to partnership, to love, to marriage, to this daughter, to everything we've built. Julian's speech was about timing and fate. 10 years ago, he said, I almost didn't go to the restaurant that night, had other plans, but something made me stop by, walk in at exactly the moment Maya was being fired. I saw her trying not to cry, saw how unfair it was, and I knew I couldn't let her go. He looked at me. Saying you don't go anywhere was the best decision I ever made, because you stayed, built this empire with me, gave me a daughter, made my life complete. 11 years after that night, Sophia started preschool. Julian was emotional. Our baby is growing up, he said. She is, I agreed, but she's still our baby. She'll always be our baby, Julian confirmed. 12 years after getting fired, we opened a 5th restaurant. This one different, upscale, fine dining, like Azure had been. Going back to our roots, Julian said, showing we can do high-end too. The restaurant was successful. Critics loved it, but I felt strange being back in that world. 13 years after that night, I ran into Derek, the manager who fired me. He was working at a chain restaurant, looking tired. "Maya," he said, surprised to see me. "Derek," I replied. "I heard about your success," Derek said. "The restaurants. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said. "I was wrong to fire you," Derek admitted. "I know," I agreed. "I was trying to impress the owner," Derek explained. "Thought being harsh would show I was serious." "It showed you were a bad manager," I said. "I know that now," Derek replied. "Too late, though." I walked away, feeling vindicated. 14 years after getting fired, we had another baby, a son. We named him Lucas. Sophia was 7, excited to be a big sister. "I'm going to teach him everything," she announced. "You will," Julian agreed. 15 years after that night, we sold one of our restaurants, the fine dining one. It was successful, but not our passion. "We're getting older," Julian said. "We can't run 5 restaurants forever." We focused on the 4 we loved, the ones that felt like home. 16 years after getting fired, Sophia started asking questions about how we met, about the restaurants. "Mom, how did you meet Dad?" she asked. "I was working at a restaurant," I explained. "Got fired unfairly. Dad walked in and saved my job." "Dad saved you?" Sophia asked. "In a way," I confirmed. "He said I didn't have to go, that I could stay." And I stayed. "That's romantic," Sophia said. "It was the beginning," I agreed, "of everything we built." 17 years after that night, Julian had a health scare, high blood pressure, stress-related. "You need to slow down," the doctor said. We reduced our hours, delegated more, focused on health over growth. 18 years after getting fired, we faced our biggest crisis. A former employee sued, claiming unfair labor practices. It was baseless, but still stressful. "We'll fight this," Julian said, "and we'll win." We did. The case was dismissed, but it took a year, cost a lot of money and energy. 19 years after that night, Sophia started high school. She wanted to work at one of our restaurants. "Absolutely not," I said. "Why not?" Sophia asked. "Because you're 14, I explained. "You should enjoy being a kid." "I want to learn the business," Sophia argued. "Later," Julian said, "when you're older." 20 years after getting fired, we threw a massive party. 2 decades since that night. 2 decades since Julian said, "I don't go anywhere." In my speech, I reflected on 20 years, on everything that happened because Julian walked in at the right moment. 20 years ago, I said, I was fired, humiliated, crying in front of customers. Then, the owner walked in, Julian Reyes, a man I'd seen maybe 3 times. He looked at the situation, looked at me, and said 3 words that changed everything. "She doesn't go anywhere." Those words saved my job, but more than that, they started a partnership, a relationship, a marriage. 20 years of building together, of loving together, of creating this life. Julian gave his own speech. 20 years ago, he said, "I walked into my restaurant at exactly the right moment, saw my manager firing my best server, saw Maya trying to hold it together, and I knew I couldn't let her go." He paused. Saying "she doesn't go anywhere" was instinct, but it turned out to be the most important thing I've ever said, because Maya stayed, became my partner, my wife, the mother of my children, my everything. 21 years after that night, Sophia graduated high school. She wanted to go to culinary school, to follow in our footsteps. "I'm proud of you," Julian told her, but also scared. "Why?" Sophia asked. "Because restaurant work is hard," Julian explained. "Brutal hours, constant stress, high failure rate." "I know," Sophia said. "I've watched you both. I still want to do it." "Then we'll support you," I promised. 22 years after getting fired, we opened a new concept, a casual, fast casual place, completely different from our other restaurants. "We're getting older," Julian said. "This is for the next generation, for Sophia to eventually run." 23 years after that night, Lucas started showing interest in the business too. He was 8, wanted to help in the kitchen. "Not yet," Julian said, "but someday." 24 years after getting fired, Sophia graduated culinary school, top of her class, started working at one of our restaurants, officially. I'm proud of her, I told Julian. Me too, he agreed. She's better than we were at that age. 25 years after that night, we renewed our vows on the anniversary of when we met. In my vows, I talked about 25 years, about how getting fired led to everything. In his vows, Julian repeated what he said that first night. You don't go anywhere, he said. That's still true. After 25 years, you're not going anywhere, and neither am I. 26 years after getting fired, we faced another health crisis. Julian had a minor heart attack. I thought I was losing you, I admitted in the hospital. You're not losing me, Julian promised. I'm too stubborn. He recovered, made lifestyle changes, started taking better care of himself. 27 years after that night, Sophia got married to a chef she met in culinary school. The wedding was beautiful, held at Tierra, the first restaurant we built together. This is where it all started, I told Julian. It is, he agreed, and now our daughter is starting her own chapter here. 28 years after getting fired, we became grandparents. Sophia had a baby girl, our first grandchild. She's perfect, Julian kept saying, just like Sophia was. 29 years after that night, we sold another restaurant, down to 3 locations now. We're slowing down, Julian said, preparing for retirement. We still have time, I argued, but less energy, Julian pointed out. 30 years after getting fired, we threw the biggest party yet. 3 decades since that night. 3 decades since Julian said, I don't go anywhere. In my speech, I reflected on 30 years, on a lifetime built from one moment. 30 years ago, I said, I was 24 years old, working as a waitress, saving for college, dreaming of a better life. Then I got fired for standing up for myself, for refusing to accept abuse from a customer. I thought it was the worst night of my life. Instead, it was the best, because the owner walked in, Julian Reyes, looked at me and said, she doesn't go anywhere. Those words changed everything, led to partnership, to innovation, to building 4 restaurants together, to marriage, to children, to grandchildren, to this incredible life. Julian's speech was emotional. 30 years ago, he said, I made a split-second decision to defend a server I barely knew, to fire a manager I just hired, to say, she doesn't go anywhere. That decision changed my life, because Maya didn't go anywhere. She stayed, became my partner in every sense, built this empire with me, gave me a family, made every day better than the last. After the party, we sat alone. 30 years, I said. 3 decades since you saved my job. I didn't save your job, Julian corrected. I saved myself by keeping you around. That's sweet, I said. It's true, Julian insisted. You made me better, made my restaurants better, made my life better. We made each other better, I said. We did, Julian agreed. 31 years after that night, Sophia took over management of Tierra, the restaurant where everything started. I'm ready, she said. Are you sure? Julian asked. Very sure, Sophia confirmed. I've learned from the best. 32 years after getting fired, Lucas graduated high school. He wanted to study business, to learn the financial side of restaurants. Smart choice, Julian told him. We need someone who understands the numbers. 33 years after that night, we faced a pandemic, COVID-19. All our restaurants shut down. We're going to lose everything, I said. No, we're not, Julian insisted. We'll adapt. We started doing takeout, delivery, outdoor dining when allowed, lost money, but survived. 34 years after getting fired, the pandemic ended. We reopened, slowly, carefully, rebuilding what we'd lost. This is harder than starting from scratch, I admitted. We're older now, Julian agreed, but we're also wiser. We know what matters. 35 years after that night, Julian retired, officially, handed everything to Sophia and Lucas. I'm done, he said, ready to just be a grandfather. Are you sure? I asked. Very sure, Julian confirmed. We built something amazing. Now it's their turn. I retired too. We traveled, spent time with grandchildren, enjoyed life without restaurant stress. 36 years after getting fired, Sophia opened a new location, her own vision, her own concept. I'm proud of her, Julian said. She's building her own legacy. Like we built ours, I agreed. 37 years after that night, we moved to a smaller house, something manageable for just us. This is nice, I said. Just us again. Full circle, Julian agreed. Except we're old now. Speak for yourself, I joked. 38 years after getting fired, Lucas got married, had a beautiful wedding. Julian cried through the whole thing. Our baby is grown, he said. They both are, I replied. We did good. We did great, Julian corrected. 39 years after that night, Julian had another health scare, a stroke. Minor, but scary. I thought I was losing you, I said in the hospital. Not yet, Julian promised. We still have time. He recovered, but slower this time, needed physical therapy. 40 years after getting fired, we threw another celebration. 4 decades since that night. 4 decades since Julian said, I don't go anywhere. In my speech, I reflected on 40 years, on a lifetime built from one fired waitress. 40 years ago, I said, I was fired from a Jour restaurant. A manager named Derek thought appeasing a difficult customer was more important than supporting staff. He was wrong. But in that moment, I thought my life was over. Then Julian walked in, said 3 words, she doesn't go anywhere. Those words have echoed through 40 years, through building restaurants, through marriage, through raising children, through grandchildren, through everything. Because Julian didn't just save my job that night, he believed in me when others didn't, gave me opportunities I never dreamed of, made me his partner in every way. Julian's speech was shorter, simpler. 40 years ago, he said, I walked into my restaurant, saw injustice, said she doesn't go anywhere. That was instinct, not planning, not strategy, just knowing that good people don't deserve to be thrown away. Maya was good people, is good people, the best person I know, and I'm grateful every day that I walked in at the right moment, said the right thing, kept her from leaving. After the celebration, we sat together. 40 years, I said, 4 decades since you saved me. I didn't save you, Julian replied. You saved yourself by being good at your job, by caring about quality, by being someone worth keeping. You just recognized it, I said. I did, Julian agreed, and I've never regretted it. 41 years after that night, Sophia had another baby, our 3rd grandchild. We're building a dynasty, Julian joked. We are, I agreed, a restaurant dynasty. 42 years after getting fired, we faced sad news. A Jour restaurant closed, the place where I was fired, where everything started. End of an era, Julian said. It is, I agreed, but we're still here, still going. 43 years after that night, Julian's health declined. The stroke had long-term effects. He needed more help, a cane, sometimes a wheelchair. I hate this, Julian admitted, getting old, needing assistance. We all get old, I said. At least we're doing it together. That's true, Julian agreed. 44 years after getting fired, Lucas took over the business completely. Sophia focused on creative. Lucas handled operations. They're better than we were, I told Julian. They learned from us, Julian said, then improved. That's how it should be. 45 years after that night, we celebrated our wedding anniversary, number 38. In my vows, I talked about growing old together. In his vows, Julian repeated his promise. You don't go anywhere, he said. Even now, even when we're old, you're still not going anywhere. Good, I replied, because neither are you. 46 years after getting fired, we became great-grandparents. Sophia's daughter had a baby, a girl. 4 generations now, Julian said, all because I didn't let you get fired. All because you saw potential, I corrected. 47 years after that night, Julian was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, early stages, but progressive. I'm scared, Julian admitted. Me too, I said, but we'll face it together. 48 years after getting fired, Julian's memory started fading. He would forget things, get confused, but one memory stayed clear. That night at the restaurant, do you remember? Julian would ask. When I said you don't go anywhere? I remember, I'd confirm. Every detail. Good, Julian would say, because that's the most important thing I ever said. 49 years after that night, Julian was mostly in memory tear. I visited every day, reminded him who I was, who we were, what we built. Some days he knew me, some days he didn't, but I stayed because 49 years ago he said, I don't go anywhere. 50 years after getting fired, Julian passed away, peacefully, in his sleep, with me holding his hand. At his funeral, Sophia spoke. My father built an empire, she said, multiple restaurants, a successful business, a legacy that continues. But his greatest achievement was simple. 50 years ago, he walked into a restaurant, saw a woman being fired unfairly, and said, she doesn't go anywhere. Those 3 words changed everything, not just for my mother, but for our whole family, because without that moment, none of us exist. The restaurants don't exist. Everything we have came from that decision. Lucas spoke next. My father taught me many things, he said, about business, about restaurants, about life. But the most important lesson was simple. Stand up for good people. Don't let them go. Recognize quality when you see it, and fight to keep it. After the funeral, I went through old photos, found one from that first year, Julian and me at Tierra, young, energetic, building something. I missed you, I whispered. 1 year after Julian died, I scattered his ashes at Tierra, the restaurant where we built our partnership, where everything started. Thank you, I said, for walking in that night, for saying I don't go anywhere, for 50 years of partnership. 2 years after losing Julian, I published a memoir about our life together, about building an empire from getting fired. The book was called She Doesn't Go Anywhere, after Julian's words that night. In the book, I was honest about the struggles, about building a business while raising kids, about balancing love and work, but also about the joy, about partnership, about building something together. 3 years after Julian's death, the memoir became a bestseller. People connected with our story, with the idea that one moment can change everything. 4 years after losing him, Sophia and Lucas expanded the business, opened new locations, built on what we created. Dad would be proud, Sophia said. He is proud, I replied, wherever he is. 5 years after Julian died, I was invited to speak at restaurant conferences, business schools, about entrepreneurship, about partnership, about that night, 55 years ago. The speech I gave was always the same. 55 years ago, I'd say, I was fired, humiliated, thought my life was over. Then the owner walked in, said she doesn't go anywhere. Those 3 words changed everything, led to partnership, to innovation, to marriage, to children, to grandchildren, to an empire. But more than that, they taught me something, that good people recognize good people, that standing up for quality matters, that one decision can ripple through decades. 6 years after losing Julian, I moved into senior living. The kids insisted, for safety, for support. I'm old now, I told Sophia. I know, Sophia said, but you're also still here, still sharp, still you. 7 years after Julian's death, I was diagnosed with cancer, treatable but serious. I'm not ready to go, I told the doctors. Then we'll fight, they said. I underwent treatment, chemotherapy, radiation. It was brutal, but I survived. 8 years after losing him, I went into remission. The cancer was gone. I have more time, I told the kids. Good, Lucas said. We're not ready to lose you yet. 9 years after Julian died, I attended the opening of a new restaurant run by our great-granddaughter, the 4th generation, named Julian's after her great-grandfather. I cried through the whole opening. He'd be so proud, Sophia said. He is proud, I replied.
10 years after losing Julian, I was invited to speak at a major event about women in business, about entrepreneurship, about legacy. "I'm 84 years old," I said in my speech. "I've lived an incredible life, built an empire, raised a family, left a legacy. But it all started with getting fired, with a man who walked in at exactly the right moment, said exactly the right thing. She doesn't go anywhere." That statement saved my job, but more importantly, it showed me that someone believed in me, saw my potential, fought for me. That belief changed everything, gave me confidence, gave me opportunity, gave me a life I never imagined. After the speech, people asked questions. "What would you tell your younger self?" someone asked. "That getting fired was the best thing that ever happened," I replied, "because it led to everything." Years later, I was still sharing the story, about that night, about Julian's words, about 50+ years of building together. The story never got old, because it was true, because it mattered, because it showed that one moment can change everything. I was fired on the spot until the owner walked in and said she doesn't go anywhere.
Those words echoed through 60 years, through building restaurants, through marriage, through children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, through an empire, through a lifetime. That's the power of recognizing good people. That's the impact of standing up for quality. That's what happens when someone believes in you at exactly the right moment. Julian believed in me, and I spent 60 years proving him right. 15 years after Julian died, I was still active, still attending restaurant openings, still advising the family business, still sharing our story. People would ask how I stayed so engaged at my age. "Because I love it," I'd say. "Because this is what Julian and I built. I can't walk away from it." 65 years after getting fired, the business had grown exponentially. 12 locations now, across 3 states, all run by family members. "This is beyond what we imagined," I told Sophia. "Dad would be amazed," Sophia agreed. 16 years after losing Julian, I wrote another book, this one about entrepreneurship and partnership, about building a business with someone you love. The book was called Building Together. It became a textbook in business schools, students studying partnership and family business, our story used as a case study. 66 years after that night, I received an award, Lifetime Achievement in the Restaurant Industry. At the ceremony, I gave a speech. 66 years ago, I said, I was a waitress, making minimum wage, dreaming of college. Then I got fired. My manager thought a complaining customer was more important than a good employee. He was wrong, but the owner, Julian Reyes, walked in, looked at the situation, and said 3 words that changed my life. "She doesn't go anywhere." Those words saved my job, but they did more than that. They showed me what good leadership looks like, what believing in people means, what fighting for quality does. I spent the next 50 years building with Julian, creating restaurants, raising a family, building an empire, all because he walked in at the right moment. 17 years after Julian's death, I was diagnosed with dementia, early stages, like Julian had been. The irony wasn't lost on me. "We're coming full circle," I told Sophia. "I don't want to think about that," Sophia said. "Neither did I admitted, "but it's happening." I started writing things down, memories, stories, everything I wanted to remember, especially that night, the night I was fired, the night Julian said I don't go anywhere. That memory, I wrote, is the most important of my life. Everything came from it. 67 years after getting fired, I moved into memory care, the same facility Julian had been in. Full circle, I told the staff. I'm following my husband's path. 18 years after losing Julian, my memories started fading. I would forget recent things, but the past stayed clear, especially that night. "Do you remember when you were fired?" staff would ask. "I remember everything," I'd say. The difficult customer, Derek firing me, Julian walking in, saying I don't go anywhere. That memory was crystal clear, even as others faded. 68 years after that night, Sophia published a book about the family business, about growing up in restaurants, about watching her parents build an empire. The book was dedicated to me and Julian. For showing me what partnership looks like, it said, for building something worth inheriting. 19 years after Julian died, I was mostly living in the past. The present was confusing, but the past was vivid. Staff would find me talking to Julian as if he was there. "He's not here," they'd say gently. "I know," I'd reply, "but I remember him. I remember everything we built." 69 years after getting fired, I passed away, peacefully, in my sleep, like Julian had, at 93 years old. At my funeral, the whole family gathered, 4 generations, all connected to that night 69 years ago. Sophia spoke first. "My mother lived an incredible life," she said, "from waitress to restaurant empire builder, from fired employee to business owner, from single woman to wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, but it all started with one moment, 69 years ago. A manager fired her unfairly. The owner walked in, said she doesn't go anywhere. That moment defined her life, defined our family, defined everything we have." Lucas spoke next. "Grandma used to tell the story constantly," he said, "about getting fired, about Grandpa walking in, about those 3 words, 'She doesn't go anywhere.' As a kid, I got tired of hearing it, but as an adult, I understand. That story isn't just about one night. It's about recognizing quality, about fighting for good people, about believing in someone's potential. Those lessons shaped our business, our family, everything we do." Our great-granddaughter spoke last. "I never met great-grandpa Julian," she said. "He died before I was born. But I feel like I know him, because great-grandma talked about him constantly, about that night, about his words, about 60 years of building together. Their story isn't just family history, it's a reminder that one moment can change everything.
That believing in someone matters, that standing up for quality is worth it. They buried me next to Julian, 2 people who built an empire from one firing. 2 people who showed that partnership can create something lasting. The headstone read simple words, "Maya and Julian Reyes." She didn't go anywhere. He made sure of it. 60 years of building together. Decades after we both passed, the story continued. The restaurants thrived, the family grew, the legacy expanded. Business schools taught our case study about partnership, about recognizing talent, about building something from nothing. Restaurant conferences referenced that night, about Julian walking in, about standing up for employees, about how one decision can ripple through decades. Our great-great-grandchildren grew up knowing the story, about great-great-grandma Maya who was fired, about great-great-grandpa Julian who said she doesn't go anywhere. The story became legend, passed down through generations, each telling adding new details, new perspectives. But the core remained. One firing, one decision, 69 years of impact. On the 100th anniversary of that night, the family gathered at the original Tierra location, still operating, still successful. 100 years ago tonight, someone said, "Great-great-grandma Maya was fired. Great-great-grandpa Julian walked in, said she doesn't go anywhere. Everything we have came from that moment." They held a ceremony, placing a plaque commemorating the spot where it all began. The plaque read, "On this site, Maya Rodriguez was fired, until Julian Reyes said she doesn't go anywhere." That decision built an empire, changed a life, created a legacy that continues. The restaurant industry remembered us differently. Maya and Julian Reyes became examples of partnership, of recognizing talent, of building something together. Articles were written, documentaries made, all trying to capture what made us special. The answer was always simple. We recognized quality in each other, fought for it, built on it for 60 years. Business leaders studied our model.
how we balanced being partners in business and in life, how we built something that lasted, how we created a family legacy. The lessons were straightforward. Recognize good people, stand up for quality, build together. Simple concepts, but powerful in practice. Relationship counselors used our story as an example of healthy partnership, of supporting each other, of building something together. We weren't perfect, they'd say. We had struggles, disagreements, challenges, but we faced them together, built through them. That's what made it work. Years turned into decades. Our great-great-great-grandchildren grew up in a world we couldn't have imagined, but they still knew the story about getting fired, about 3 words, about 69 years of building. On the 150th anniversary of that night, the family still gathered, still told the story, still honored the legacy. 150 years ago, they said, an injustice happened. A good employee was fired unfairly. But someone stood up, said she doesn't go anywhere. That moment of standing up for quality changed everything, created this family, this business, this legacy. The restaurants continued. Some closed, new ones opened. The family adapted, changed with times, but always remembered where it started, how it began. That night, Maya was fired, until Julian said she doesn't go anywhere. In the end, the story became bigger than us, became a reminder that one moment can change everything, that recognizing quality matters, that standing up for good people is worth it, that partnership can build empires, that believing in someone can change their life. I was fired on the spot until the owner walked in and said she doesn't go anywhere. Those words echoed through 69 years of my life, through building restaurants, through marriage, through children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, through everything. And long after I was gone, they continued to echo, teaching people, inspiring them, showing them what's possible when someone believes in you at exactly the right moment. That's the power of 3 words. That's the impact of recognition. That's what happens when someone fights for quality. Julian fought for me, and together we built something that outlasted us both. That's our story. That's our legacy. That's what remains. The wisdom from our story spread beyond restaurants, beyond our family, into broader business culture. Leadership coaches used our example, teaching about recognizing talent, about standing up for employees, about how one decision to fight for someone can change everything. Julian's decision to say she doesn't go anywhere became a case study in leadership programs, in management training, in business ethics courses. What made him do it? Instructors would ask. What made him fire a manager he'd just hired? What made him defend an employee he barely knew? The answer was always the same. He recognized quality, saw injustice, and acted immediately. That split-second decision changed 2 lives, built an empire, created a legacy that lasted over a century. Human resources professionals studied our story about employee retention, about recognizing good people, about the cost of bad management. Derek firing Maya was a perfect example, they'd say, of short-term thinking, of appeasing the wrong people, of losing good employees over nothing. Julian reversing it was textbook good leadership, recognizing value, standing up for quality, making the hard call. Universities taught entrepreneurship courses using our story, about partnership, about building from nothing, about balancing business and personal relationships. Maya and Julian showed something rare, professors would explain. They built a business empire while maintaining a loving marriage, raised children while opening restaurants, created a legacy while staying partners. That balance is what students needed to understand. The restaurant industry created awards in our names: the Maya Rodriguez Award for Service Excellence, the Julian Reyes Award for Leadership, given annually to people who exemplified what we represented. Recipients would study our story, learn about that night, about the firing, about the 3 words, about 69 years that followed. Each winner took away the same lesson: stand up for quality, recognize good people, build something that matters. Culinary schools added our story to their curriculum, not just about food, but about the business side, about recognizing talent, about creating opportunities, about building teams. Students would read the memoir I wrote, study how we built Tierra, analyze our partnership, discuss what made us successful. The answers varied, but certain themes emerged. We recognized each other's strengths. We complemented each other. We built something together instead of competing. We faced challenges as a team. Simple concepts, but powerful in practice. Decades after our deaths, researchers studied our business model, how we scaled, how we maintained quality across locations, how we transitioned leadership to the next generation. The findings became textbooks, case studies, teaching materials, all trying to capture what made us special. But the researchers always came back to that first night, to Julian saying she doesn't go anywhere, because that moment set the tone for everything that followed, for how we treated employees, for how we recognized quality, for how we built. Sociologists studied our family, 4 generations in the restaurant business, each learning from the previous, each building on the foundation. What made the legacy sustainable, they asked. Why did children and grandchildren continue the business? The answer was always the origin story, the story of getting fired, of Julian standing up, of building from that moment. That story gave meaning to the work, made it more than just restaurants, made it a legacy worth continuing. Economists analyzed our impact on the local economy, on job creation, on the restaurant industry. Maya and Julian Reyes created thousands of jobs over decades, reports would say, but more importantly, they created a model of treating employees well, of recognizing talent, of creating opportunities, of building something sustainable. Years after we both passed, someone tried to buy the business, offered an enormous amount, enough that the family could retire. "We're not selling," Sophia said. "Why not?" the buyer asked. "Because this isn't just a business," Sophia explained. "This is what my parents built. This is their legacy. This is the empire that started with, 'She doesn't go anywhere.'" The family kept the business, kept growing it, kept honoring what we created. On the 200th anniversary of that night, the family was enormous. Hundreds of people, all descended from me and Julian, all connected to that moment. The gathering was massive, at a convention center, with speeches and presentations and celebrations. One descendant, a historian, gave a presentation. 200 years ago tonight, she said, my ancestor, Maya Rodriguez, was fired from a restaurant called Azur for defending herself against a difficult customer. The manager, Derek, thought appeasing the customer was more important. He was wrong. The owner, Julian Reyes, walked in, assessed the situation in seconds, and said 3 words: "She doesn't go anywhere." That decision saved a job, but it did more. It recognized quality in someone others dismissed. It stood up for fairness over appeasement. It chose long-term value over short-term peace. And from that decision came everything: a partnership, a business empire, a marriage, a family. 200 years of legacy, all because someone stood up for quality at exactly the right moment. The crowd reflected on 2 centuries of impact from one split-second decision. Later, people shared stories about how our legacy influenced them. One woman talked about standing up for an employee. "I was a manager," she said, "had a difficult customer demanding I fire a server. I remembered Maya and Julian's story, said no, defended my employee. That server is now my business partner." A man discussed recognizing talent. "I almost passed on hiring someone," he explained, "because they didn't have the right credentials. Then I thought about Julian, how he recognized quality in Maya despite her just being a waitress. I hired the person. They're now my most valued employee." The stories continued, each person influenced by our example, each learning to recognize quality, to stand up for good people, to build something that matters. The restaurant industry had transformed over 2 centuries from what we knew, but certain principles remained. Recognize talent, treat people well, build quality, stand up for employees. These lessons traced back to us, to that night, to those 3 words. Museums featured exhibits about our story, about the restaurant industry, about entrepreneurship, about partnership. Visitors would walk through recreations of a Zur restaurant where I was fired, of Tierra where we built our partnership, of all the locations we created. Children would ask questions. Why was she fired? Because of a bad manager, parents would explain. Why did the owner save her? Because he recognized quality. What happened next? They built an empire together. The story resonated, generation after generation, because it was simple, understandable, inspiring. One person standing up, one decision to fight for quality, one partnership building something lasting. In the end, that's what people remembered. Not the number of restaurants, not the amount of money, but the story. The human story of injustice and intervention, of recognition and partnership, of building something from nothing. I was fired on the spot until the owner walked in and said, "She doesn't go anywhere." Those words changed my life, built an empire, created a family, left a legacy that continued for centuries. That's the power of recognition. That's the impact of standing up. That's what happens when someone fights for quality at exactly the right moment. Julian fought for me. I built with him. Together, we created something that outlasted us both, something that taught generations, something that mattered. That's our story. That's our legacy. That's what remains 200 years later. The lesson still clear.
Still relevant, still teaching. Recognize quality. Stand up for good people. Build something that matters. Simple words, profound impact, eternal truth. The story spread globally, beyond Miami, beyond America, into international business culture. Entrepreneurs worldwide studied our example. In Tokyo, business students analyzed how we built partnerships. In London, restaurant owners discussed employee recognition. In Paris, leadership coaches taught about standing up for quality. Each culture interpreted the story through their own lens, but all recognized the universal truth that recognizing quality matters, that standing up for people is worth it, that one decision can ripple through centuries. International restaurant chains adopted policies based on our model, employee protection programs named after us, ensuring that good workers couldn't be fired on a whim, that quality was recognized and rewarded. The Maya Rodriguez Protection Policy, some called it, others used different names, but the principle was the same: protect good employees, recognize quality, build something lasting. Tech companies, surprisingly, embraced our story, using it to teach about recognizing talent, about building partnerships, about creating company culture. Steve Jobs would have understood Julian, one CEO said. Both recognized quality instantly. Both fought to keep good people. Both built empires from that recognition. The comparison wasn't exact, but the principle held. Universities created scholarships in our names, for hospitality students, for business students, for anyone showing the qualities we exemplified. Recipients would study our story, learn about that night, about the partnership, about 69 years of building. Each scholarship winner took the same oath: to recognize quality in others, to stand up for good people, to build something that matters. Nonprofit organizations used our example, teaching about workplace fairness, about employee rights, about standing up against injustice. Maya's story shows what happens when someone is fired unfairly, advocates would say, but Julian's response shows what good leadership looks like. Both parts matter.
The documentary about our lives won awards, played in film festivals worldwide, translated into dozens of languages. Each viewing sparked the same discussions about fairness, about recognition, about building partnerships, about creating something lasting. Critics analyzed the film, discussing what made our story compelling. It's the simplicity, some said. 1 firing, 3 words, 69 years of impact. It's the partnership, others argued, 2 people building something together. Both perspectives were valid. Books continued being written, academic studies, popular biographies, business analyses, each trying to capture what made us special. The answers converged. We recognized quality in each other. We fought for that quality. We built on it for 69 years. We created something that outlasted us. Simple concepts, but rare in execution. Philosophers discussed our story in terms of ethics, of moral decision-making, of standing up for what's right. Julian's decision represents ethical leadership, they'd write, recognizing injustice, acting immediately, prioritizing fairness over convenience. That split-second choice showed his character and shaped everything that followed. Psychologists analyzed the partnership, how we balanced business and romance, how we raised children while building an empire, how we maintained connection across 60 years. The findings became textbooks about healthy relationships, about successful partnerships, about building something together. Marriage counselors used our example, showing couples how to support each other, how to build together, how to maintain partnership through challenges. Maya and Julian weren't perfect, they'd say. They had disagreements, challenges, struggles, but they faced them together, built through them. That's what made it work. The restaurant where I was fired, Azure, was eventually torn down, replaced by a high-rise, but the city installed a historical marker. On this site stood Azure Restaurant, where Maya Rodriguez was fired in 1955, and where Julian Reyes said she doesn't go anywhere. That moment changed restaurant history. Tourists would visit, take photos, learn the story. Some would propose there, making their own promises, starting their own stories. The marker became a landmark, a reminder of what happened there, of how one moment changed everything. Cities around the world created similar markers at significant business locations, at places where important decisions were made, all inspired by our story, by the idea that moments matter, that decisions ripple, that standing up for quality changes things. On the 300th anniversary of that night, the world had changed dramatically. Technology we couldn't imagine, society we wouldn't recognize, but the story remained, still taught, still relevant, still inspiring. 300 years ago, people said, a waitress was fired, an owner intervened, a partnership began, and from that partnership came centuries of impact. The details might change with each telling, but the core remained. Recognition matters. Standing up for quality is worth it. Building something together creates lasting impact. That truth transcended time, transcended culture, transcended technology, because it was fundamentally human, about seeing value in others, about fighting for what's right, about creating something meaningful. Our great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren grew up in a world we couldn't fathom, but they still knew the story about the firing, about the 3 words, about the empire that followed. They would gather annually at the original Tierra location, still operating after 3 centuries, still serving food, still representing quality. This is where it started, they'd say, where great-great-great-great-great-grandma Maya and great-great-great-great-great-grandpa Julian built their partnership. This is the foundation of everything we have. The story had become mythology, passed down so many generations that details blurred, but the essence remained. One person stood up. One person was saved. Together, they built something lasting. That narrative structure resonated generation after generation because it contained universal truths about recognition, about fairness, about partnership, about building something that matters. In the end, the story became bigger than us, became a parable, teaching about quality and recognition, about standing up and building together, became a reminder that moments matter, that decisions ripple, that one person standing up can change everything. I was fired on the spot until the owner walked in and said she doesn't go anywhere. Those 9 words echoed through 3 centuries, through building restaurants, through raising families, through creating legacies, through changing how businesses treat employees, through teaching millions about recognition and quality. And they continue to echo in business schools and restaurants, in leadership training and employee handbooks, in stories told and lessons taught, all because Julian walked in at exactly the right moment, saw injustice, and said 3 words: "She doesn't go anywhere." Those words changed my life, built an empire, created a family, left a legacy that continues teaching. That's the power of recognition. That's the impact of standing up. That's what happens when someone fights for quality at exactly the right moment. That's our story, told and retold for 300 years, still relevant, still teaching, still inspiring, because the lesson is eternal. Recognize quality, stand up for good people, build something that matters. Simple truth, profound impact, forever. From that one night in 1955 to centuries beyond, from one firing to a global movement, from 3 words to eternal wisdom, the impact continued growing. New generations discovered the story through different media, through different contexts, but always with the same core lesson: stand up for quality, recognize good people, build something meaningful. Young entrepreneurs starting businesses would invoke our names. What would Maya and Julian do, they'd ask. When facing tough decisions about employees, about quality, about standing up for what's right, the answer was always clear: recognize quality, fight for it, build on it. That's what we did. That's what worked. That's what created something lasting. Business ethics textbooks featured entire chapters about us, about that decision, about the ripples it created, about 300 years of impact from one split-second choice. Students would debate, was Julian's decision purely ethical, or was it also smart business? The answer was both. Recognizing and keeping quality employees is both morally right and business savvy. That dual truth made the lesson powerful. The world kept changing, but the story remained constant, a reminder that certain truths are eternal, that quality matters, that standing up for people is worth it, that one moment can change everything. I was fired on the spot, until the owner walked in and said, "She doesn't go anywhere." Those words became more than history. They became principle, philosophy, truth, guiding millions in how they treat people, how they recognize quality, how they build something lasting. That's our legacy, not just restaurants or wealth, but wisdom, about recognizing value in others, about standing up when it matters, about building something that outlasts you. Julian saw value in me when others didn't, fought for me when he could have walked away, built with me when he could have built alone, and together we created something that taught the world about quality, about recognition, about standing up, about building together. That's what remains, 300 years later and forever. Our story, our lesson, our truth. She doesn't go anywhere. 3 words that changed everything, that started a partnership, that built an empire, that created a family spanning centuries, that taught the world about recognition and quality and standing up for what's right. Julian walked in at exactly the right moment, saw what was happening, made a split-second decision to fight for quality, to stand up for a good employee, to say she doesn't go anywhere. And I stayed, built with him, created something that outlasted us both, something that taught millions, something that mattered. That's the full story. From firing to empire, from 3 words to eternal wisdom, from one night to 300 years of impact. That's Maya and Julian Reyes. That's our legacy. That's what remains forever. The story of one firing that became a movement, of 3 words that became wisdom, of 2 people who showed the world what's possible when you recognize quality and fight for it, when you stand up for good people, when you build something together that matters. She was fired on the spot until the owner walked in and said she doesn't go anywhere. 9 words that echo through eternity, teaching, inspiring, reminding that quality deserves recognition, that good people deserve protection, that standing up matters, that building together creates something lasting. That's our eternal legacy. Did you like my story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.